Hey, sheepdogs. So let's talk about aggressive animals. And sometimes you have to get inventive with things when it comes to aggressive animals. And it happens. I remember when my son was doing track and I was following along behind him in my car, and this dog came running down the street. We were at the edge of a particular town and going around this big curve, and this dog came out, and it was out for blood. And this is probably going to raise some people's hackles, but it's what happened, and I don't need someone's permission to protect my son. But this dog was not trying to get attention. This dog, every marker on this dog, the hackles up, the low stance, the rapid movement, the eyes, the clacking of the teeth, and the barking and the growling as it came in, this dog was out for blood. And my son had nowhere to go to get away, and honestly no duty to retreat. And so I accelerated, and as a very gentle man but a protective father, I went right around my son at quite a bit of speed. And before that dog, there was about a car length and a half between my son and the dog. When I arrived, he had stopped running forward, and I hit the dog. The dog went sideways at the last possible second. The dog bounced off of my front of my car. The dog lived, and took off running. My son was like, "Wow, Dad, thanks," because he had nothing else. I have nowhere to go. And there are times and places and moments where we have no choice but to act in the defense of someone else to protect them from an animal. And I've done so. There was a mare that was trying to back into one of my family members on a horse, and she wanted to fight the horse that they were on, and I ran interference and prevented it. There are times you may have to defend someone from an animal, and you may be watching the perimeter of your church, and an aggressive dog runs onto the grounds, and you have to make a decision, because a lot of times the firearm is not the answer in that circumstance. And I've been backed into a corner where I almost had to pull the trigger on a dog that was coming at my then pastor's daughter and son-in-law, and she was actually pregnant with their second child with my grandson's, with my pastor's grandson at the time. And so crazy stuff, and I had to, you have to make all of the same decisions in a split second, and that's where, you have to think about these things in advance and kind of halfway have an idea of what you would do, or it'll catch you flat-footed. And so in that circumstance, I actually was rushing them away. I've talked about it a long time ago, but rushing away my wife, my pastor's daughter and son-in-law, and the child they had at the time, had the son-in-law rushing them away while I ran interference. And I will tell you, it doesn't seem normal, and it's probably not, but if you draw the attention to yourself, it is a way to protect innocence. You may become a chew toy in the process, but you are protecting innocent life. And what I did was, when the dog oriented on them and was looking for easy prey, I had dropped to one knee, and I was like, "Rrr, rrr, rrr." And it's the funniest thing in the world. It got their attention. These two dogs came right at me, and I'm like, "Come to Papa." And I'm like, you don't have a clue what's about to happen to you. And they were out for blood, and it was all the markers that they were going to harm, not barking and bouncing, or not wagging their tail and barking because they want attention. No, these dogs were out for blood. And later they backed off. They actually tried to come at my wife and I about 3 different times, and I was able to make contact with the owner, and he took care of it. Never saw the dogs again. And but dealing with an aggressive animal, and that can happen. You can end up with an animal that has rabies or something. Typically, if you can create an environment around it and treat the animal much the way you would someone who's mentally ill, and get people away from the animal, most of the time, if you're dealing with an animal, it's going to be an overly excited puppy that maybe jumps up on an elderly lady and knocks her down or something. Or there was a dog that entered a church when I was a child and was going around the entire church wagging his tail, just looking at everything, and they finally lured him back outside. He was like, no, I belong here, I'm good. You can be dealing with an aggressive animal, and if you can call animal control and get them back, that's a good thing. But in an emergency where there's an animal, and a lot of times it's not a cat, it's a dog, you could be dealing with an aggressive animal at that point. It's probably going to be a dog. But then sometimes you actually have the reverse that's true. Years ago, there was a couple of boys on the playground that grabbed a hold of this dog, and the boy tried to straddle the dog like the dog was a horse, and that's a dominance move, and the dog wasn't having it, and he turned around and he just barely nipped this kid. And the parents of the kid, they were out for blood. And it was not the dog's fault. What the kid did was they were manhandling and being rough with the dog before anybody could get to them, and then the dog acted in its own defense. And so law enforcement arrived and looked at the details of it, and the dog was actually removed by the lawful owner outside of town. Paperwork was done and all of that good stuff. You have to have your after action, your incident reports and stuff. But when the dust settled, the parents were actually being over the top about it, whereas it was really not the dog's fault. And so you can have situations like that. But again, going back to dealing with an aggressive animal, there are some interesting things that you can do. And by the way, if you're dealing with a dog fight, you probably know this. I'm going to pause and talk about dog fights for a moment. Don't ever inject yourself in a dog fight. Some of the worst dog bite tearing injuries I've ever seen is someone's own dog in a dog fight, and they know a whole lot more about what they're doing in a dog fight than we do, and jumping in and injecting ourselves into that. I know people love their pets, but we are more important than a pet, and I've seen people receive life-altering injuries from it. Best to let the dogs have their conversation, have their disagreement, turn a hose on them. You probably don't have one handy. I have seen, dealing with an aggressive dog, I have seen dogs that do not like fire extinguishers, and you can have a $40 to $60 solution to a really bad situation with a dog. Let's say that you've got a dog that's running at people, but you don't have a clear field of fire or something like that. Dogs don't like the sounds of tasers, by the way, contact tasers. I've seen that several times where an officer will peel the cartridge off their taser, and you get this, I can't even do it. I can't even do it justice. You get that sound, and dogs do not like that. And so a lot of aggressive dogs actually back away very, very quickly from the sound of a taser. So you probably don't have that option either. And then you've also got the fire extinguisher, and I have actually seen the lowly fire extinguisher so many times. I have seen it and heard of stories, more than seen, heard stories of people who are like, yeah, I had no idea how effective that fire extinguisher would be in that moment, spraying it kind of to create a field in between ourselves and the dog. So just some thoughts about dealing with an aggressive animal. I think it's something we don't really talk about a lot in the church safety space. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. Remember, Semper Discipline, that lifestyle of disciplined training. God bless.